Hey everyone, Pat Mesiti here, live at 5. Had a few days off, but I want you to watch this live at 5 from beginning to end, because one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to keep posting the brilliance of Peter Credlin and how she is forcing Dictator Dan, a man responsible for 800 deaths, 800 deaths, a man who passed a manslaughter law in his own state that he actually should be answerable to. But before I do that, picked up this morning's Courier Mail, and we've got an election coming up here in Queensland, and this is what it says. So who really is in charge? Anastasia Palaszczuk basically is a patsy to the unions. Now, sorry if this is a bit of movement here. It's because I'm recording from my studio and snuck up here, and Jonathan, graciously is helping me put this together from my phone. Well, apparently she can't even choose who's on her cabinet. According to the Courier Mail, let me read it. Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has been sensationally told by the state's most powerful union boss that she alone will not be the one handling our cabinet positions if Labor wins on the 31st of election. Gary Blocker-Bullock said that there is a process. In other words, you voting for Labor is a voting for government control. Sorry, it's not a vote for Labor. It's a vote for the unions. Haven't we had enough of this? Look at what happened in Victoria. Dictator Dan handed the hotel quarantine to a union-based Labor Party person that was basically funding them, and it's documented. Haven't we had enough? You see, those of you out there that are still out there saying that Palaszczuk saves lives, bullcrap. Her, Stephen Moles, and Jeanette Young are doing nothing to save lives. Over 500 suicides. Where's the saving of lives of that? The lockdowns, the border restrictions are killing more people, destroying more businesses. And she's not even in charge. She's not even, they want to bring Jackie Trad back in, who was basically, allegedly, under corruption allegation. Haven't we had enough? Haven't we had enough? How much suffering does Australia need to have under these regimes? You know what? You can always tell the morals, the values, the principles of a person when they have power. And Palaszczuk and Dan Andrews and that other recalcitrant down there in Perth, they just showed their true colours and continue to do so. A vote for this insidious left-wing socialist government is a vote for more lockdowns, more controls, more no funerals, more no families, more socialist agenda, big government, and more leadership by unions. Unions. Mr. Bullock here is running the state. Now, who is running the state? I mean, Palaszczuk hands it to Milesy. Milesy hands it to the health minister. Now we've got the union, the head of the union. Look, I know many of you don't get Sky News and so forth, and I really want to pay honour to Peter Credlin. What an amazing woman. A woman who in one interview that she turned up to, one press conference, not a lefty journalist, ABC, Channel 7, Channel 9, a woman who 16 years has been in politics, served under a PM, went in and asked a couple of questions, bang, straight away. The most senior public servant resigns. By the way, Chris Eccles could not remember. He could not remember who made the call. And all of a sudden, his amnesia went away when his phone records were called in. Well, Peter has done an incredible job, and I want to play you the whole interview. Please watch this. Please post this. Please share it. This is gold, and she's only just getting started. You see, Dan says, oh, yeah, I'll hand over my phone records, but here's the thing. What about his chief of staff? Who is she? What's her name? Who is this ghost of a woman? Well, we know who she is, and feel free to post her name up here if you wish to do so. Where was she? Where's her phone records? Where's the WhatsApp? Where's the Messenger? Where's the Viber? You need to watch this interview in its entirety. And Peter is doing a great job. Please send her your support. The trolls are out They are out there harassing her. The unions are basically bashing her. They're trying to vilify her. But Peta Credlin should be a national hero for what she's done. I want you to watch this. I've watched this over and over again, and I'm posting, especially for you guys that don't get Sky News and so forth. Watch it. Let it open your eyes, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. But please watch this and please share it.
Over the weekend, the Victorian Premier dashed the hopes of 5 million Melburnians, all but ruling out any significant easing of restrictions that was due to happen in a few days' time. Today, in his press conference, he backed it in, Daniel Andrews, saying that he might consider some slight easing come the end of the week, but nothing in terms of economic restriction relief, meaning restaurants, hospitality, small business, retail, all of them will stay shut as the city now enters its 14th week of this lockdown, just as today the World Health Organization says this.
We in the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of control of this virus.
Of course, the only reason why Victoria is in this mess, 810 dead in Victoria from this virus, and everywhere else right across the country combined, it's only another 88 dead. Well, the reason Victoria is in this mess is that the Premier and his government rejected the National Cabinet's decision to put police and the Defence Force in charge of hotel quarantine. Instead, they went it alone, hiring in some very, very dubious ways incompetent private security guards in a decision that no one says anyone made. And that even if someone did make it, well, no one can remember who that person might have been. 800 dead. And the decision makers sound like they're all appearing in an episode of Fawlty Towers. This matters for the dead and their families. And it matters for every business tonight, every worker not back at work, because this is a government that even now has no confidence in its contact tracing ability, months and months on from earlier disasters, to even try and lift restrictions. This is why I'm pursuing the matter. The decision-making, the incompetence, the deceit, and the cover-up. In a day of dramatic developments right across the country politically, there was a dramatic development here in Melbourne as the head of the Department of Premier and Cabinet resigned effective immediately. Now, in his statement to the media announcing his departure, Mr Chris Eccles, well, he now remembers what he previously couldn't. A phone call to the then Police Commissioner Graham Ashton within the critical 6-minute window that you know I've been focused on for some time. On Friday the 27th of March, as we know, the day that the National Cabinet agreed the whole idea of hotel quarantine for returning travellers, within 1 minute, literally 1 minute of getting Ashton's text at 1:16, Chris Eccles confirmed in his resignation statement today that he called Ashton back at 1:17 p.m. 1 minute flat. 1 minute. And as we know, after that, well, Ashton's a happy man, sending up texts like this to his mate in Canberra in the Federal Police, saying a deal had been set up by DPC, meaning the Department of Premier and Cabinet, that private security would be used in Victoria to guard quarantine hotels and not his police officers like in every other state. This sudden recovery of memory is what happens when people have to produce their phone records. It's why all the phone records are needed, all of them. Outgoing calls, incoming calls, Telstra, WhatsApp, Slack, Confide, all of them. All of these encrypted devices, all of these encrypted apps, because every one of these ministers and officials who don't know and can't recall have to put the paper on the table. Well, yesterday the Premier buckled and said records from his office and his phone will go in. But as I reiterated today when questioning him at the press conference, he's only agreeing to half the evidence going in. You discussed yesterday about the type of material to be provided. Because it's on request of the telecommunications carrier as opposed to a warrant, It will not and cannot include encrypted material because that's not within the scope of the telecommunications carrier unless it's warranted under federal power. Will your office willingly provide their devices?
We're happy to.
That means handing over
fully
the phones,
comply with the request that's been made.
As I said, Telstra or any other carrier can only provide under law, even if a Premier's asking, only a couple of texts, provided, of course, those texts have not been long deleted, and any of the numbers called. It'll look just like your own phone bill. Now, if it was a proper police warrant, it would be everything, right? It would be everything, ingoing, outgoing to everything. But even then, and this is the real worry our security agencies have, even with a warrant, still the encrypted messages that politicians love to use, well, they won't be and can't be accessed. And while he says he will cooperate, well, surprise, surprise, very few of Daniel Andrews' ministers, their staff or even departmental heads, very few of them are putting their own records forward to this inquiry. Now, without them, you can't help but think that the Coate inquiry will be nothing more than a whitewash. What's Lisa Neville, the police minister, hiding? Where's her records? Where are the records of Simon Femister, the bloke who was creating a plan for private security hours before the Premier announced it publicly on that fateful day in March, when everyone now says there was no decision? Do they even understand how stupid this all sounds? But in addition to the recovered memory of the Chief's bureaucrat call to the Commissioner, here's what else we know today. At about midday, in his own testimony to the Coate inquiry, the now former Chief of the Premier's Department, Chris Eccles, this is back on the 27th of March, he stepped out of this National Cabinet meeting, stepped out briefly, he says in evidence, to go and get the hotel quarantine work underway. And he says he left to call the Secretary of the Department of Jobs, Simon Femister. And he said he told Femister just to organise hotel rooms and transport. Nothing more at this stage, he says, and nothing about security. But on the way out of the room of National Cabinet, where he was sitting next to the Premier, on the way out, he goes through the ante-room. And who's there but the Premier's Chief of Staff? And he says in evidence that he told the Premier's Chief of Staff exactly what the National Cabinet had just decided. Remember, this is noon, and the meeting kept going until 1:10. Remarkably, the Premier's Chief of Staff has never been called to give evidence on this. Or she hasn't been called to any inquiry at all, actually. No inquiry. She's never made a statement about what she knew and if and when she contacted anyone after finding this out an hour before National Cabinet had even broken. But as a result of Eccles leaving National Cabinet and speaking to this Simon Femister, the whole system starts to whir into action. At 12:35, and we know this from a statement to the inquiry by Claire Phoebe, one of Femister's senior deputies, in her evidence to the Coate inquiry, we know that a group of officials, well, they had a meeting at 12:30, and that security was absolutely in the mix. It's in the minutes. Indeed, word was already leaking out, this is where Victoria might go, material given to the inquiry includes an email from a senior manager with one of the private security firms called Unified Security Group Australia. And he told his staff, again, 12:30, before the National Cabinet decision had even happened, but had been obviously communicated by Mr Eccles, he told his staff that they needed to quickly get online, do the federal government's COVID infection control training, and that had to be done by 2:30 that afternoon. Now, why the hurry? Why the hurry? Well, it turns out this training that they all had to do online was a prerequisite to getting one of these Victorian government security contracts. And we know that the PM was going to announce the decision at 2:30, which she did. So you can see why 2:30 in that email was so critical. So Unified want to get all the training done, get in early, get the jump on their competition, and they do, and they start hotel quarantine the next day at midnight, the 28th, 29th of March. They started manning those hotels. And you know what? For that, they were paid $30 million for 3 months' work. You can see why I think this stuff stinks to high heaven. How does this company get worded up about a National Cabinet decision about hotel quarantine before the National Cabinet meeting has even finished? $30 million for 3 months' work. Now, where was this pursued in the Coate inquiry? But back to that phone call from Chris Eccles to the Police Commissioner. Even today, as he resigned and admitted he had called the police chief in that fateful 6 minutes at 1:17 p.m. on the Friday the 27th of March, well, Eccles says, my evidence, and I quote here, my evidence is emphatic that neither myself nor the Department of Premier and Cabinet made a decision to use private security as part of the hotel quarantine program. Now, he might not have made the decisions, but as we know now, admitted today, he communicated them. Now, you ask yourself this. Who would be capable of making a decision while National Cabinet was still meeting or immediately after it to use private security rather than police and the military that every other state did? Who in the Victorian government would have that kind of authority? I'll leave those questions to you for the moment, but in the meantime, surely the Premier's Chief of Staff should be required by the Coate inquiry to give detailed testimony of what passed between her and Eccles in that vital exchange as he left National Cabinet briefly around 12 noon, after which the fateful arrangements started to be put in place, even as I say, National Cabinet was still meeting. The only people privy to the decision of National Cabinet, which had yet to broken up, was Mr Eccles, who left the room and spoke to your Chief of Staff and spoke to Simon Femister. I'm asking you again, should your Chief of Staff provide evidence to the inquiry?
Who the inquiry seeks evidence from and the nature of any requests they make is entirely a matter for them.
Now, the Premier, in trying to wriggle out of responsibility for this dreadful decision to use private security, a decision, let's not forget, he himself announced that same day, well, he accused me of failing to read the next sentence in his press conference transcript, which he claimed showed that no decision had been made. This is the 3:15 press conference on the 27th of March. Well, I say to this, Premier, wrong. Your statement, and I quote it, that sentence you claim I failed to read today, your statement is, and I quote, that I'll give you a fuller update tomorrow. It in no way shows that no decision had been made. Likewise, your insistence that you couldn't possibly have made the decision to use private security because it was, quote, an operational matter. I've worked for a leader, I've worked for a PM. Everything a leader does is operational. That's the whole point of government. And that's why the truth matters. Because without the truth, we the voters can't get and don't get good government. We just get this gaggle of highly paid people with amnesia who run from responsibility when their bad decisions turn deadly. And I know I speak for millions of Victorians tonight when I say enough is enough. Cut the spin. Tell the truth. Cut the spin or go.